Recently, I had a conversation with my wife of 9 years, Emily, that unfortunately ended in tears. It reminded me of a moment 4 years ago when I almost lost my job. Back then, Emily, whom I affectionately call M, was heartbroken at the thought of me missing our anniversary and urged me to come home. Now, years later, it's her who won't be there for our anniversary. Despite my feelings, I didn't try to change her mind. Still, these past 10 years have been the happiest of my life. When I first met Emily, she was 26 and at the beginning of her career in marketing. She visited our engineering firm to pitch the idea of advertising in high-end magazines, which was far beyond our budget at the time. In the midst of the crowd, I couldn't help but notice her, a striking woman with auburn hair. After consulting with my business partner, he helped me get her attention long enough for me to ask her out. After our first date, she admitted she knew our company couldn't afford her services, but that didn't matter. Despite everything, I had already fallen deeply in love with her. Our relationship progressed over 8 months, and eventually she moved in with me. After another 7 months, she left her freelance career behind for a more stable office job. Just 5 months later, we were married. Every day since, I've felt incredibly lucky that I was able to convince her to become my wife. Feeling a sense of urgency, I picked up my phone and dialed my boss. I've worked at the company since its inception, back when Alex first started it. Our small team of 5 engineers had made significant strides in cutting production times across various industries. "Alex, I know you're there. Pick up," I pleaded. After a brief pause, I heard his voice on the other end. "Max, I'm swamped right now. You know that," he said. Deciding to keep it short, I replied, "Well, I'm heading out now, and I won't be back until next week." "Leaving? Where to?" he asked. "I'm off to celebrate my anniversary with Emily," I explained. He responded with a chuckle. "All right, enjoy. And don't forget, knock before you come back in." I laughed. "You always know how to crack me up." He added, "Yeah, I get that a lot, but not from the people who really know you." "Sincerely," I added, "sorry, it's just that ever since they brought in this new guy to run Emily's department, things at home have been tense. I thought a getaway to a hotel might help smooth things out." "Well, it definitely can't hurt," Alex said. Then with a grin in his voice, he added, "Just do me a favor. When you're off seeking excitement, think of me." "Deal," I said with a smile. "See you next week." I didn't hang up immediately, but instead asked Alex's secretary, Lisa, for a favor. She had a knack for getting things done, and I needed her to arrange a plane ticket. After our conversation, I headed home to pack. While I was in the middle of packing my suitcase, the phone rang. "You've got 50 minutes to make it to the airport for security. Your ticket is ready at the counter under your name," Lisa informed me. She had managed to book me a return flight for next Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. Unfortunately, there were no rooms available at Emily's hotel, so she reserved one for me just 3 blocks away. "Safe travels. See you next week," she added before hanging up. I rushed to the bathroom, grabbed my shaving kit, tossed it into my suitcase, and made a quick sweep of the room, even turning off the coffee maker, which wasn't something I normally remembered to do. Over the past 12 years, I had learned a few shortcuts that always helped me get places faster, so I quickly made my way to the car. Even with the high speed I maintained, I arrived at the airport with plenty of time to spare after registration, security, and boarding. Once I was finally seated on the plane, I put on my headphones and played some music. As a nervous flyer, music always helped me relax. 4 hours into the flight, I was suddenly woken from a pleasant dream about Emily by a gentle tap on my shoulder. It wasn't a surprise that I had dozed off, considering I hadn't been sleeping much lately. Some of that was due to work stress, but a lot had to do with the rough patch Emily and I had been going through. For the past few months, she had been distant, keeping me at arm's length. It all started when she mentioned that a colleague from another department had been promoted and was now running hers. Emily was frustrated, convinced the decision was a mistake, and became determined to prove them wrong. For the first few weeks, she'd come home utterly drained, constantly talking about how she was strategizing to outshine this man, Robert Thompson. But as time went on, her resolve weakened. She began to mention working more closely with him, and it made me uneasy. As their big joint project to win a major client loomed, the thought of something more between them nagged at me, though Emily always reassured me that I had nothing to worry about. As I took my bag from the overhead compartment, I thought about how I could subtly invite Emily to dinner without giving away the surprise. After taking a taxi to my hotel, I casually struck up a conversation with the driver, who happened to mention a cozy, dimly lit restaurant situated between my hotel and Emily's. "That sounds perfect," I said, intrigued, as it seemed exactly like what I had in mind for the evening. Once I checked in, I quickly showered and rushed back out, hoping to catch Emily before she headed out for dinner. As I glanced at the lobby clock, I noticed it was nearly 6 o'clock. The street outside was busy, but I decided to walk, following the simple directions the receptionist had provided. The route was straightforward, and I made a mental note of the restaurant the taxi driver had mentioned. It was only a few steps away from her hotel. Before I exited the taxi earlier, I had made sure to leave the driver a generous tip. At 6:15, I entered the lobby of Emily's hotel and joined the line at one of the reception desks. A woman behind the desk caught my eye and motioned for me to come forward with a smile. "Good evening," I greeted her. "My name is Max Bennett. I was wondering if my wife, Emily Bennett, is in her room. I'd really appreciate the opportunity to speak with her if she's available." She paused briefly, double-checking. "Emily Bennett, right?" After a quick glance through her notes, she continued, "Yes, she's staying here. Let me call up to her room and see if she's in." A moment later, she turned back to me with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no answer. Would you like to leave a message?" "No, not right now," I replied, trying to mask the disappointment in my voice. I was hoping to surprise her. "We're celebrating our anniversary tomorrow. If you could avoid mentioning this conversation to her, I'd be very grateful." "Of course, sir," she assured me. "Not a word. And I wish you a wonderful anniversary tomorrow." "Thanks," I said with a smile. "I might try my luck at that restaurant tonight. Who knows? Maybe things will work out." "Good night," I added, heading towards the far end of the lobby, hopeful that my plan would still come together. I found myself in a bustling hall filled with people going about their business, some working, others serving, sitting or eating. The place was packed, and I realized that finding her in such a crowded space would be a long shot. Then I noticed a restroom off to the side, near the back wall. I scanned the room thoroughly, looking left and right, hoping for any glimpse of her, but no luck. After taking care of what I needed, I positioned myself near the corridor entrance, giving the hall one more sweep with my eyes. It seemed hopeless. Spotting her in this crowd felt nearly impossible. Just when I was about to give up, I caught the faint sound of laughter that sounded unmistakably like hers. My eyes followed the direction of the sound, but tall booths obscured my view, revealing only snippets of the people seated at the tables. Not wanting to be seen until I knew for sure, I quietly retraced my steps, walking alongside the wall. As I approached the fourth table from where I was standing, there she was. I found her, sitting there deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. She looked stunning, wearing the same dress she always wore for evenings filled with dancing. They seemed relaxed, completely at ease with each other, their conversation flowing naturally. I couldn't help but wonder what was really going on between them. It felt far too intimate to be a simple work dinner. My heart raced when he leaned in closer to her, and I instinctively reached out to the door frame for balance. Then, as she bent down, their lips met in a soft, lingering kiss. A mix of emotions surged through me. I pulled away from the doorway and moved into the center of the hall, sinking into one of the padded high-back chairs. Time seemed to stand still. I sat there, watching them, my gaze fixed on their table. Suddenly, her laughter rang out again, and I turned my head just in time to see her walking out beside him, her hands wrapped tightly around his. They seemed so close, their laughter and conversation filling the space between them. They walked past me, barely 18 feet away, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. She looked at him with an adoration I hadn't seen in a long time. My breath caught, leaving me speechless. I headed for the exit, my face likely betraying the surge of emotions rushing through me. displeasure mixed with a newfound resolve. I walked straight to the sidewalk, unable to tear my eyes away from them. She clung to his arm, leaning in close, her affection for him unmistakable. I watched as they strolled down the street, eventually disappearing into a restaurant I had noticed earlier. Snapping out of my daze, I hurried towards the door, but forced myself to slow down, giving them time to get further inside. I stopped outside, taking a few deep breaths, trying to steady myself and regain my composure. The expressions on their faces told a story, but I needed to understand more. Even if I couldn't fully make sense of it, I was determined. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door and slipped inside, staying close to the wall. The entrance was unattended, so I stood still for a moment, allowing my eyes to adjust as I scanned the room. Finally, I spotted them, seated at a small table meant for two at the far end. I moved cautiously, hugging the walls, and found a small table where I sat down. Almost immediately, a waitress appeared behind me. "What can I get for you, hun? What's your drink?" she asked. "Double whiskey on the rocks," I answered, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside. I eavesdropped on their conversation, catching snippets of what they were saying. "Our meeting tomorrow isn't until 11 o'clock, so we can keep celebrating all night," the man said in a low voice to Emily. "I'm so glad you didn't let him guilt you into going back home. We can't miss our 3-month anniversary for anything." "I can't believe it's already been 3 months," she replied, excitement in her tone. "And it could have been longer," he mused, "if only you'd said yes when I made my move during my first week on the job." He smiled at the memory. She chuckled and added, "I had to play the innocent, considering I'm supposed to be a married woman." She shook her head, recalling when he boldly asked her out, despite her being married, with Maggie standing right there. "Maggie told me you had a thing for me," he said, grinning. "We should do something nice for her," Emily suggested. "She was a key player in getting us together." Just then the waitress came by, served their drinks, and left as quickly as she had arrived. They raised their glasses in a toast, celebrating the 3 months they'd shared and the future they envisioned. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said as their glasses clinked. "There'll be many more," she replied with a smile. The waitress placed my drink in front of me and asked, "Is that all, dear?" I handed her $12 and said, "Thanks," before turning my attention back to the couple at the next table. They glanced up briefly, but since I was just another face in the crowd, they paid me no mind. Emily noticed his lingering gaze and turned to look at me. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "a guy should always have a camera for moments like these." Her expression, wide-eyed and speechless, was perfect, like something you'd see on a poster. "Wow, 3 months. That's quite the anniversary. I still remember mine, but after 9 years it loses its spark." I looked between them and added, "Why not celebrate 3 months? It's a symbol of passion and prosperity, right?" "A couple like you deserves a gift. Here's mine," I said, tossing the ring toward Emily. "And here's something unexpected," Robert cut Emily off with a loud, angry outburst. Sensing that staying any longer would only make things worse, I looked directly at Emily, who was trying to calm him down, and said, "Tell him he should be grateful he wasn't at my house. Let me know where I can send your things. If you're smart, you won't show up at my place, and putting some ice on his nose might help with the pain." With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the club. I made my way swiftly back to the hotel. Emily didn't know my current address, and considering what had just happened with her new friend, I doubted she'd bother trying to track me down. The further I distanced myself, the better. When I entered the lobby, I went straight to the front desk and politely asked, "Excuse me, do you have the contact information for any airlines? I need to book a flight as soon as possible." The staff member responded promptly, "Of course, sir. Do you have a preferred airline, and could you tell me your desired destination and time of departure?" After providing the details, she assured me she'd notify me in my room once everything was arranged. Back in my room, I paced back and forth, trying to make sense of everything. How did it get to this point? Then it hit me. Maybe Emily had missed her true calling. Her performance these past few... I shook my head, my frustration growing. Staying in the room any longer wasn't an option. I quickly grabbed my bag and headed downstairs. As I reached the lobby, the receptionist from earlier waved me over. "Sir, if you leave now, you might catch the last flight of the day. Check-in closes in 35 minutes. If you miss it, the next flight won't be for another 4 hours," she informed me. I thanked her, silently hoping the taxi drivers around here were quick. I signed the receipt the attendant handed me, and she smiled warmly, saying, "We hope you'll stay with us again next time." As I walked out of the lobby, memories flashed through my mind, but I pushed them aside and hailed a nearby taxi. "I'll give you $60 if you can get me to the airport in under 35 minutes, I said, sliding into the back seat. "You've got it, boss," the driver replied confidently. He was good, managed to get me there in just 25 minutes. I paid the fare, handed over an extra $160 tip, thanked him, and rushed toward the terminal. Reflecting on it later, I realized there had been no need to rush. I still had a few minutes to spare after clearing security, and found myself waiting for the boarding announcement. This time, unlike the previous flight where music was my only distraction, my thoughts kept me entertained. A random, amusing thought crossed my mind, and I almost chuckled. I remembered how Emily's mother, Victoria, had never been particularly fond of me. She always kept Greg, her husband, firmly under her control, treating him like he was of no significance. I couldn't stand her attitude, and she knew it. Once, she even accused me of eventually cheating on Emily, claiming she had seen me eyeing other women when we were together. Throughout the entire flight, my mind raced with doubts. I reached for the photo I always carried, of Emily and me, and stared at it closely. Strangely, the person beside Emily in the picture felt unfamiliar. I discreetly looked around, making sure no one was watching, before refocusing on the photo. It was me standing next to her, and something about the way she looked at me, no, at him, caught my attention, sparking doubt. I always prided myself on my memory, unlike what many say about men. Emily often tested my recall, playfully asking, "Do you remember this or that?" And much to her frustration, I remembered everything. Every conversation, every plan, every whispered secret in the dark. I held on to them all. Sitting there now, I couldn't shake the nagging thought. If I hadn't noticed something like this developing over the past 3 months, what else had I missed? That man had been interested in her from the moment they met, but she claimed to have pushed him away, maintaining her image because of our marriage. The possibility of them being together tormented me. I formed a plan. Once I got home, I would pack up all her belongings and deliver them to her mother's house. Victoria, of course, would find a way to blame me, but the truth was undeniable. I had seen it with my own eyes. When we landed at the airport, it felt like my family life was unraveling before me. I headed straight to my car and joined the line of vehicles exiting the parking lot. The drive home blurred together. I could barely recall any of it, but that didn't matter. I made it. How long the journey took remained a mystery, but it felt irrelevant now. Stepping into the dimly lit house, I was struck by an eerie sense of unfamiliarity. The idea that this emptiness would become my new normal hit me hard. After dropping my bag, I made my way to the kitchen, flicking on the answering machine along the way. Emily's voice came through, filled with desperation. "Max, please don't do anything rash. I'm coming home to talk. Please wait until I get there." Her words carried a raw pain, but I couldn't listen to it, especially not in that tone. I reacted without thinking, slamming my fist down in frustration. The anger felt justified, but deep down, I knew it wasn't a solution. She had betrayed me, and now all I wanted was to protect myself from making any foolish decisions. It was clear that sleep wasn't coming to me that night. I headed to the garage and gathered the suitcases Emily had accumulated over the years. I picked out a large black one, along with a bag for her clothes, setting them aside. The rest I brought to the bedroom. As I went through her closet, I selected a few key items and quickly stuffed them into the large bags. I repeated this process a few more times before shifting my focus to the dresser. It had been a while since I'd last seen any of her clothes tucked away in there. For a split second, a random thought crossed my mind about getting hot dogs, but I brushed it off. I knew I was supposed to go to her mother's house, but I really didn't want to deal with that. Instead, I decided to handle things on my own. I impulsively drove to the hardware store to buy new locks, thinking that would be the best way to move forward. When I returned, I realized I couldn't just leave her belongings piled up in the front room. Following my instincts, I loaded everything into the car and headed to her mom's house. I drove carefully, and once I arrived, I unloaded everything near the garage, not wanting to leave Greg, her father, with too much work, knowing he'd get no help from his wife or Emily. Just as I dropped the third box on the ground, my mother-in-law, Victoria, appeared. "Max, what's going on? What's all this?" she asked, clearly puzzled. "Well, Emily might need her clothes when she comes by," I explained. I figured she'd grab them herself, but they were cluttering the front room, so I decided to bring them over. Her expression grew more confused, and her face paled slightly. "What do you mean when Emily comes by? I thought she wasn't in town yet. Why would her things be here?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Victoria, I'm not entirely sure how she's planning to handle things," I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "I assumed she might stay with you temporarily. She might even be considering moving in with the person she's been seeing lately. I can't say for sure. That's why I brought her stuff here." Her face grew even paler as my words sank in. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice trembling, almost on the verge of hysteria. "Are you accusing my daughter of something? She had to stay away for work. Emily would never cheat on you." I saw them together just the other day. They seemed genuinely happy, celebrating their 3-month anniversary at a bustling nightclub near their hotel. I had asked her repeatedly to come home and celebrate our own anniversary, but she regretfully declined, saying she couldn't make it. Determined, I booked a flight to surprise her. When I arrived, I found them having a private dinner. The mood between them was undeniably romantic, and I didn't want to ruin their moment. Watching them exchange soft kisses over the table, I realized I needed time to process what I was seeing. Later, they walked past me in the hotel lobby, and I considered confronting her, but then she leaned in and whispered something into his ear. I couldn't bring myself to interrupt them. Needing to clear my head, I stepped outside for some fresh air. To my surprise, they left shortly after and headed to a nearby nightclub. I followed them, sitting close enough to overhear their conversation. She mentioned not wanting to leave him on their 3-month anniversary, and he corrected her, saying it had actually been 4 months. That's when it all hit me. I couldn't just walk away from this. I had to intervene somehow, but I needed proof. Trying to stay unnoticed, I sat there and took it all in. It was then, after 9 years of sobriety, that I had my first drink. 9 long years ever since Emily first voiced her concerns about my drinking and how it could harm our marriage. In a symbolic gesture, I even gave her my wedding ring, thinking it was fair for us each to have something of our own. But, truth be told, I found his gift to her much more meaningful than mine. Now, as I waited for her inevitable return and the confrontation that would follow, I knew she would show up at my doorstep sooner or later. I wanted to shock her. "You're lying," she'd say. "How could you speak this way about the woman you've been married to for 9 years? She's confided in me, telling me how deeply hurt she is by it all." "I'll never call her my wife again," I replied coldly. "You may feel the need to defend her because she's your daughter, but I don't have that obligation anymore. I've seen it with my own eyes. For the past 3 months, I've been living alone while she's been with him. Ever since he joined her company, she's changed, and it's remarkable how little remorse she's shown, despite the values you raised her with. She lied to my face for 4 months straight, without a flicker of guilt. If you think I'm going to welcome her back into my home, you're just as naive as she is. But that's your decision to make, not mine. I've already made mine. She's clearly chosen him, and now he can have her. She won't have to hide their affair anymore. Once she's finished with this charade, I'll send her here, and you can see for yourself who's been telling the truth." As I placed the call, I instructed her, "When she answers, make sure to deliver the message exactly how you want, and don't forget to mention that I'm curious to see how she handles all of this." With that, I got into the car and drove off, feeling unsettled. I spent hours pacing around the house before eventually setting up a makeshift workspace in a quiet corner of the garage. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. Curiosity took over, and I went to answer it, cautiously opening the door without speaking. I instinctively stepped back as Emily walked in. Instantly, I realized I had been in the garage. "You must have been in the garage," she observed, shutting the door behind her. "I knocked, but you didn't hear me." "I was just tidying up," I replied, glancing around the room. Emily let out a deep sigh. "Well, Mom already called. It seems you've already decided what to do about me," she said, her expression a mix of sadness and frustration. "What did you expect? That I wouldn't care about your affair?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "I suppose I wasn't thinking straight. Not rationally, at least. I was caught up in disappointment." "It's ironic because all I did was think," I confessed. "There was nothing to distract me. No dinners, no nights out, no whispering or kissing in the dark. Just me, alone. While the woman who shared my house, my food, my life, was able to lie to my face, look me in the eye, and still be with someone else. Not exactly a comforting thought, is it?" "Are you really ready to throw away 9 years of our life together? Is that what this is?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Did you ever bother to ask me about it?" I replied. "Would it have made any difference if I had been in a real relationship with someone else? Instead of you playing games? I thought that question would haunt me. But it doesn't seem to matter anymore, does it? Now, you and the guy whose name I can't even remember are free to move on without worrying about me. No more fights over who to spend anniversaries with." I walked toward a chair and sat down, the weight of it all sinking in. "I believe I understand your point," Emily said softly. "Do you really, Emily?" I asked, my voice sharp with frustration. "Because I doubt you truly do. For you, this was just a mistake, wasn't it? Something you've probably justified in your mind, maybe even found a way to blame on me. Was it my actions, Emily? Did I somehow push you into another man's arms?" She lowered her gaze, her voice quiet. "No, I don't blame you for what happened. It just happened." 3 months of an affair doesn't just happen," I said coldly. "It takes effort. You had to hide it, keep it secret. That takes planning. And let me tell you, you played your part perfectly. I was completely fooled. The fact that you both found time to carry on this charade is astonishing. I can't even imagine the laughs you shared at my expense. And that tearful phone call last night?" I shook my head. "That was award-worthy. Maybe you missed your calling. You could outshine the last 3 Oscar winners with a performance like that." I let out a short, bitter laugh. Honestly, I couldn't help it. Just a quick burst of laughter before I stopped myself. I don't even know why it happened, but one thing's clear. You don't love me. Because if this is how you treat someone you claim to love, then I don't want to hear your anger. Spare me that." "How can you say that?" she said, her voice rising. "How can you believe I don't love you after 9 years together?" "Let me put it to you this way," I said, my tone serious. "Since you're so fond of questions, I have one for you. You know how you usually react to situations, right? So tell me this. Imagine if I had a close encounter with another woman just once, no long affair. How would you react?" She looked at me, her expression solemn, and said softly, "Honestly, I'd probably ask you to leave and file for divorce." "Thanks for your honesty," I said, nodding. "That's what I thought. I even imagined you might throw something at me. Who knows?" I smiled slightly, trying to mask the pain. She gave a faint smile in return. "Maybe." "Now imagine this," I continued. "For almost 4 months, every day we spent together meant nothing to me. It was all just an act to keep you from knowing the truth, that my heart was with someone else. That after I left you each day, I spent hours with my mistress. Do you really think I could still love you after all that time?" "Show me some faith, Emily," I said firmly. "It feels like you don't care, as if none of this matters to you. But the time we spent together, it mattered to me. It wasn't just empty words. I truly enjoyed being with you." Her eyes searched mine, but the silence between us felt heavier than ever. "Do you remember the last time we were close, Emily? When was the last time you initiated one of our tender kisses? When did you last act like my wife? I questioned, my voice edged with disbelief. After everything I've seen and overheard, it's hard to take you seriously when you say you love me. I'm not a fool, Emily. I heard you talking to that gossip Maggie about him. You couldn't wait to tell her about the moment he arrived at the office. And then, to make matters worse, the two of you thought it'd be a great idea to buy her a gift for bringing you two together. I guess you've already picked your bridesmaid. All you need now is his best man, and the wedding plans will be complete, I said, leaning back in my chair. So, in the end, you're no different from me. Should I expect a process server at my door soon? I asked, sarcasm dripping from my words. What was Maggie's first question? Where are you going to live? Don't worry, you won't find any server knocking on your door with divorce papers. That's my job, case closed. Time to walk away from Emily and start fresh. If you see me with someone else, don't bother getting involved, I added. What exactly are you trying to prove here, Emily? I pressed. She looked at me, her expression defiant. I don't need to prove anything to you. I did what I did for me, not for you. Why would I fight for a man who never respected me enough, who thought I'd just accept or excuse his behavior? The moment I gave you that ring was the moment I made it clear it was over. I'm done wasting energy on something that means nothing to either of us. I can't forget, and I can't forgive. Your actions, both past and present, make it clear that I'm not a priority to you, so it's time for me to move on. I'm not sure what outcome you expected, but you've ruined everything, Emily. Go ahead, sleep at his place now, I said, locking my eyes on hers. So, you're kicking me out and keeping everything for yourself? After 9 years, that seems unfair, she replied indignantly. It's always about fairness, isn't it? Well, let's be clear. If you want the house, you'll have to buy it. As for me, I'm keeping it. I've grown to love this place, with all its extra space. I can finally make it into what I've always wanted. I figured you and Robert had already found somewhere else to live, I said. His name is Robert, she corrected, clearly frustrated. I don't care about his name, Emily. Do you really think I care where he lives? I asked. Of course, he has a place, she answered quickly. Good. Problem solved, I remarked coolly. But here's the real question. Do you honestly think his wife will be okay with all this? I said, watching her face for a reaction. Wait, how do you know about his wife? She asked, suddenly serious. Emily, do you think I'm clueless? Why else would you still be here? Let me guess. He doesn't want to leave his wife for you, does he? And now you're considering coming back to me? I shook my head. I've thought long and hard about this. We've had 9 years, but it's over, Emily. That decision was made the moment you chose him. Remember those thrilling 3 months you had together? Maybe you'll get more of those in the future. But when I gave you that ring, it was the end. Don't bother bringing up our 9-year history. It clearly didn't matter to you then, and it doesn't matter to me now. Those 9 years will be wrapped up in a nice set of legal papers. Once they're ready, the offer on the house remains the same. If you don't want to leave, come back and take whatever you need. But make no mistake, I'm moving on from someone I'll never trust again. Living together under the same roof is impassable. So, what's your plan? Do you want the house, or are you ready to move on? I asked, my tone resolute. No, I don't want to keep this house. Give me a few days to find a new place, and I'll probably take most of the furniture, she said, pulling her hand from her pocket. She extended her hand, holding the ring. What should I do with this? She asked, offering it to me. Do whatever you want with it. Actually, I have a suggestion. Why not wear it as a toe ring? It might be more fitting after everything you've done, I said with a smirk. Maybe I'll just pawn it then. I could use some extra cash, she shot back. Well, good luck with that. You won't get much for it. They buy these things by weight, and you'll be lucky to get even $150. Not enough to buy a real gold ring, but hey, it's your ring. Do whatever makes you happy, I replied, turning towards the door. Did you get all my stuff out of the closet? She asked. Yeah, I packed everything, though I wasn't exactly careful. I'll give you a call in a few days. Hope your clothes aren't too wrinkled, I said nonchalantly. Mind if I check? She asked. Go ahead. You know where everything is, I answered, watching her expression change slightly. She headed upstairs, rummaging through the bedroom, closet, and finally the bathroom. A few minutes later, she came back down, stuffing her cosmetics into a floral bag. "You were thorough. You only missed a few things. I might have to call you when I'm ready to move," she said, forcing a smile. "Sure, I'd be happy to help, as long as it's not too close to home," I said, smiling politely as I stood up to open the door for her. When she suggested we go for a walk, I paused, thinking for a moment before an idea crossed my mind. "Wouldn't it be better if you ran instead?" I said, keeping a straight face. "Then kiss me here and now," she said, turning toward the exit. "I wouldn't dare kiss someone when I have no idea where she's been," I retorted, closing the door behind her. That was the last time we communicated. 3 months later, my lawyer had finalized all the divorce paperwork, and I was instructed to pick them up on Monday. My agenda for that day had 2 main stops: the lawyer's office, and then a trip to my mother-in-law's house to get Emily's signature. I needed her to sign, so there'd be no lingering hope of reconciliation. As I parked in front of the familiar house, I took a moment to reflect. This was it, the final step. Soon, I'd find peace and quiet once more, knowing this chapter was closed. I got out of the car, walked to the door, and rang the bell. To my surprise, it was my mother-in-law who answered. "Well, Max, what brings you here? I thought you'd forgotten about us," she said with a hint of sarcasm. "Not quite. Is Emily home?" I asked. "Yes, she's here. Come on in," she replied, closing that door behind me. Emily entered the room a moment later, and I got straight to the point. "Emily, I'm here for you to sign these papers. I'll file them tomorrow, and that will finalize our divorce. I just want this to be over." She sighed and responded, "I guess I was never good enough for you, was I?" Ignoring her attempt to drag the conversation into emotional territory, I watched as she left the room briefly and returned with a pen. Without hesitation, she signed the papers, her hand moving quickly and deliberately. When she was done, she slammed the pen down and shoved the papers into an envelope. "Free now," she muttered under her breath. "Thank you for signing. I hope you find peace and happiness," I said, my focus now shifting to the closure we both needed. She called for her mother to return to the room as I made my way to the door. Driving away, a flood of mixed feelings hit me. This was truly the end of our relationship, and I couldn't help but feel that my life was about to change in unexpected ways. A month later, the divorce was finalized. It was the beginning of a new life for me. However, I soon received some surprising news from Emily's father. Apparently, after our divorce, Emily had asked Robert to leave his wife and marry her. But Robert, to her shock, told her he couldn't. He admitted that he didn't have any real romantic feelings for her. After that revelation, Emily had to face the reality that she would be without both me and Robert. Now, according to her father, Emily lives with her parents, still struggling to move on. She lost her job in disgrace and has been searching for something new. Just like Robert, who left her behind, she's unhappy. Thanks to me, as her father suggested. Her dating life has been no better, filled with encounters with married men or others of questionable character. These poor choices have led her to develop a psychiatric condition, and she's now undergoing therapy